you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First, thank you, Dr. Calvi, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Brandy Roberts, for the words that you spoke earlier, and Nick Getchett, who's going to come up afterward and ask me questions. I'm going to take a big risk and thank him in advance. If I hate the questions, I reserve the right to withdraw. First, let me say, I was thrilled to be invited tonight for any number of reasons. I like the Texas Panhandle, and I was over in El Paso earlier. I gave a speech in Las Vegas this morning. I flew down to El Paso. Then I came over here. And when I was in El Paso, I was doing an event for the congressman there, who's a good friend of mine. And he's been a big supporter of the military and the veterans. Fort Bliss is one of the nation's most important Army bases in El Paso. And I thought about one thing I would tell the students tonight. I got off the plane and I was greeted by the commandant of Fort Bliss, a major general by the name of Dana Petard, a native of El Paso, an African American who was, when he was young, one of my military aides. Every couple of years, each military service, the four main ones and the Coast Guard, pick a young officer they believe has unlimited potential, and they ask him to go around with the president, travel everywhere the president goes, and carry the infamous football, which contains the machine that if you plug the right numbers into it, you can launch nuclear weapons. Thank God we never had to do that. But it's a very responsible position, and it gives a young person an unbelievable window on how the affairs of the nation are conducted. And there I was looking at Dana Petard, thinking about him when he was young. And I loved the guy when he worked for me. I could just tell he was going a long way. I've kept up with a lot of those people. And one reason I try to spend a fair amount of time on college campuses is to convince all of you who are students here that there are no limits to your potential. If you have imagination, if you have vision, if you're willing to work for it. I mean, this guy was an ordinary kid from El Paso, and now he's a two-star general, in one of America's most important Army bases that coincidentally is in his hometown. I was the first person in my family ever to graduate from college. And when I was young, my family moved from a town of 6,000 to a metropolis of 35,000. I thought I was in Paris or something, you know. But in the first year, we didn't really have a place to live, and my mother was a nurse anesthetist, and my dad was going to work in a Buick dealership with his brother, my uncle, and my uncle had a farm out in the country, and so he'd ask us if we'd live on the farm for a while and take care of the farm. Now, I am so old. I was 7 at the time. I lived on a farm in the state adjoining this one that still had goats and sheep. And I fed them and did first one thing and another. And we had a ram on that farm that was the meanest, hardest-headed animal I ever saw in my life. And one day at 7, I took my 9-year-old cousin out into the field where the sheep were to see the ram, and he started chasing us. And we started running for the fence. And the bot, there were these, we didn't tend the field very well. It was full of very big rocks. And I was short and fat and tripped over a rock. And here comes the ram, and like a fool, what I should have done is just kept running for the fence. And if he knocked me down, got up and run for the fence again. Like a fool, I ran back to the nearest tree, which I thought I could run around and outrun the ram. But the problem is the tree was only about this big around. And that sucker caught me and head-butted me right in the middle of my skull. And then he'd back up, and he was very symmetrical, this ram. He'd back up a few steps, and then he'd run, and he'd butt me in the gut. Then he'd back up, and he'd butt me in the head. And then he did this 23 times. It's a miracle I was here. It's no wonder so many people thought I was crazy. So anyway, I was bleeding profusely around that, and my uncle came down, it was his daughter that was with me, and he picked one of these huge rocks up and threw it as hard as he could at the ram from about 6 feet. And he hit the ram square in the middle of the skull, and the ram just shrugged his shoulders and ambled off. Didn't walk off, didn't squeal, didn't whine, didn't anything. That's when I decided I needed to do something for a living besides farming. If I had known that one day we'd have $7 wheat, $7 corn, and $15 soybeans, I might have had a different opinion. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea to get out of Dodge, and so I did. I want to begin by thanking the university for inviting me here and offering to donate $100,000 to the fund to complete the memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania for Flight 93. You'd all kind of identify with Shanksville. Pennsylvania has been described as Philadelphia in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, and Alabama in between. It's rural, it's agricultural, and it's full of good people. I love it, and I've been to every hole in the road in the state, I think. But what happened there is something everyone from Texas can identify with. Texas' whole character and self-image has been shaped by the almost mythic proportions that the story of the Alamo has attained here. In truth, the battle for Texas independence and all that later happened, including Texas becoming the Lone Star State, was shaped not by a military victory at San Jacinto, but by the defeat at the Alamo, because those 238 brave souls held out so long and cost the Mexican army so much in casualties and in ammunition that by the time they did overrun the Alamo and kill everybody there, Texas had organized an army under Sam Houston that could defeat them. And it was one of those relatively rare examples in human history when the people that gave you the state that you now treasure made a deliberate, collective decision to give their lives for a larger objective. Everybody that goes into battle risks their lives, but they knew in advance they were going to perish. The first such example in human history that I cited when President Bush and I were with Speaker Boehner at Shanksville for the 10th anniversary involves the now famous story of the Spartans at Thermopylae, which was immortalized in the recent kind of high-tech movie, The 300. But the Greek king Leonidas picked his 300 finest soldiers, and he said, the Persians are coming. Their numbers are staggering. We cannot defeat them. But if we stand in the pass at Thermopylae, they will have a hard time getting by us, even though we are only 300. But you have to know we will not survive. And to the man, they all went. And the Persian king gave Leonidas and the 300, he was so impressed, he gave them a chance to withdraw. And he said, you know we will devour you. We will fill the air with so many arrows, the sky will turn dark. And Leonidas replied, then we will fight under the clouds. And they did. And the battle was so protected, and the casualties on the Persian side were so heavy that by the time they had killed the 300, the Greek people had moved and survived. The difference in Shanksville is, you all probably remember what was going to happen. That was the third plane. And it was supposed to, there had been the two planes, or fourth plane actually, there had been the two planes that had gone into the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, the attack on the Pentagon. This plane was supposed to hit the United States Capitol. The lifeblood of our democracy, the symbol of our freedom and our history. The difference is, the people on Flight 93 were just ordinary men and women. They didn't sign on for battle.